could read your thoughts. From the future.
The movies of 1985.
Hello. It is week 25 of the year 1985. That's Tuesday the 18th of June to Monday the 24th of June. I am your host, Jason Hutchins, trapped here in the year 1985, where all I do is play with my Commodore 64 and watch movies on VHS. That's the way we roll in 1985. Now, how do I select those movies, you ask? Well, I spin a bingo machine and select them at random. So let me do that right now. Oh, there's a number. Number's out. It is number 9. Got to be careful with that one. There's a little dot to show me that it's 9 and not a 6. So let me look that up on my Commodore 64. I've got a little spreadsheet program, and it says that number 9 is a movie called Pale Rider. Now, I don't know much about this one, but I think it might be a Clint Eastwood movie. Maybe something about a horseman, perhaps. Well, I'll find out when I go and rent it from a video store. Now, we were talking about Civic Video being the first franchise video store. Well, guess what? There's a Video Easy that's opened up in Applecross, and they are a big franchise, aren't they? Bigger than Civic Video, that's for sure. So that's quite close to where I live, so I'm just going to catch a bus over to Garbo, that's Garden City for the uninitiated, and from there on to Applecross to rent the video cassette. I might bag a donut from Puff and Fresh on the way back, but while I'm doing that, let me flick on the TV and you can watch NAD.
King G overalls fit any shape and situation.
Okay, I'm back. I'll just pop this in.
If they're any tougher,
And let's just pause that. So, I'm back with the video cassette. It is a Clint Eastwood movie. This looks like a classic Western, the cover. So it's a black video cassette cover with an illustration of Clint Eastwood shooting a pistol with his hat on, standing in front of a sunset. So it's all reds and yellows and browns and things like that. It's a pretty good picture. And it just says Warner Home Video at the top, and then it says ... and hell followed with him, and hell followed with him, and then at the bottom, Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider. That's pretty much the front. Flipping over to the back, we've got another shot of Clint Eastwood, looking very similar, and then down the bottom, a shot of a silhouetted gang of about 7 men. Running time approximately 111 minutes. It is a marvellous sweeping picture of the Old West which confronts the timeless issues of faith, justice and revenge. Now, we've already watched a pretty good Western this year with Silverado. That was surprisingly good. I'm not sure if I hold as high hopes for Pale Rider because I haven't really heard of this one, whereas I heard a lot about Silverado. On the left at the back it says, "The man with no name has returned." Oh, so does this qualify as a sequel in that case? I have a bit of a policy of not doing sequels, but I guess it's a bit too late if that is the case. I'm not really a Western Clint Eastwood kind of guy, so I might have missed that. They really should put numbers after them, shouldn't they, to let you know. So it says a young girl quietly something from the Bible, I guess quietly recites from the Bible, as the small mining community in which she lives has been savaged and raped by marauding riders. There's always marauding riders in the West, isn't there? And I looked and beheld a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was death. Okay, so one of the four horsemen. Okay, I get it. And hell followed with him. So I wonder if there's going to be the other three horsemen. I wonder if Binky the horse will be making an appearance. Clint Eastwood stars and directs Pale Rider, and by his own admission, it carries the hallmarks of his earlier Western High Plains Drifter and the much acclaimed classic Shane. So I don't think it really is a sequel. It's just sort of cast in the same mould. So that's pretty much all I can say about Pale Rider. If you're in Australia in the year 2025, you can rent this movie on all the usual suspects. But for me here in 1985, I'm just going to press play on tape and enjoy Pale Rider.
Warner Brothers will be proud to bring you the next great American Western. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider. They came out of the mountains to ravage and rape a small mining village. Suddenly, a stranger appeared, and hell followed with him. Some called him preacher. Others called him gunfighter. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider.
Well, Pale Rider. What a weird movie this one is. So the first thing I need to comment on is that music in the trailer that you just heard, which you might recognise. It's a news theme. I think it's the Channel 4 news theme, or maybe BBC 4 news theme. My English listeners will correct me on that one, and I believe it's still in use to this day. I guess the Americans thought it went with Westerns, perhaps, but I'm not sure if this even is a Western. It certainly isn't as good as Silverado, which we saw earlier in the year. I'm probably going to give this one a nice Western cactus and say it's a mediocre 3 stars. But what I did realise, now, Clint Eastwood obviously is the man with no name in this movie. He's also the director of this movie. And interestingly, this is the last movie in which he appears with a full beard. Little factoid for you there. But I realised when I was watching this that he is basically the Terminator. And I wonder whether the Terminator is based on Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name character, because he's basically a perfect fighting machine. He doesn't make any mistakes. He's a perfect gunshot. He can shoot 6 bullets and kill 6 men. He can twirl around a piece of wood, ninja style, and knock out a whole gang of thieves. And he never seems to get injured or put himself in any risk or anything like that. He turns up out of nowhere and then he disappears like a ghost. In fact, that's exactly what he is. That's sort of revealed towards the end of this movie, that maybe he is a ghost. At the start of the movie, he gets summoned when a young girl makes a prayer after her little town is ransacked by marauders. So let me get to that first. I'll describe to you the first 10 minutes of this movie. We fade straight in to a beautiful mountain landscape. There's like mountains and then a river and then green grassy plains. You know, they just go for the money shot straight away. It's unlike Silverado, where we really build up to this very impressive landscape shot in a very clever way. That's not the case here. We just fade straight into it. And what happens is the most weird opening sequence. So it is a bit of a back and forth montage between this idyllic village, or it's really a settlement out in the middle of nowhere, and then these marauders on their galloping horses coming to wreak havoc. It intercuts between the two of them while the credits display, and it goes on for about 3 or 4 minutes. And I will painstakingly go through every cut so that you can appreciate how ridiculous it is. So we fade into this beautiful mountain scene. Then you see the group of marauders riding on horseback with dark music, and we cut to this peaceful settlement with light music. And there's kids playing. Then we cut back to the baddies, then back to the settlement, then back to the baddies, then back to the settlement, where men are now panning for gold in a pristine stream. Then we cut back to the baddies just for a few seconds before cutting back to the gold panners, then back to the baddies again, then back to the good guys, where now someone's playing with a dog. Now back to the baddies, back to a mother and daughter hanging out the washing. This is getting boring by this point. They're making it super obvious that the marauders are coming to get these kind people, but we cut back to the baddies anyway, splashing through a river, then back to the settlement, starting off in a shot of the river so that you can say maybe it's the same river, then back to the baddies, then back to a man digging a hole with a shovel, then back to the baddies, back to a young girl walking her dog. This is the girl that says the prayer later on. The dog starts barking, so he's heard something, and brrr, some doom music right on cue. Then back to the baddies, back to the lady hanging out her washing again, back to the and dogs barking, and the music starts to anticipate that something's going on. The adults are starting to look around, confused. What's happening? Back to the baddies, back to the young girl now calling for a dog, which is strangely named Lindsay. Lindsay, Lindsay. That's the first piece of dialogue, and it comes about 3 or 4 minutes through. More confused looks from the folks in the village. They can now hear the distant hoofbeats, but we cut back to the baddies, then back to the good guys, then back to the baddies again, then back to the good guys, back to the baddies, back to the good guys, back to the baddies, and back to the good guys again. How many cuts is that? And then finally the baddies arrive in the same place as the good guys, and there's gunshots and chaos, and the baddies use ropes that they tie to their horses to pull buildings down. Now, they're not killing anyone, but they're driving them out of their settlement. They do, however, shoot a cow, and the girl tries to save her dog Lindsay, but they shoot Lindsay too. And then the baddies leave, and you just hear, it's all silence, but you hear the sound of a baby crying, that tragic sound, and then the girl bends down to her dead dog and picks it up, and it's like this stiff as a board. It's like this prop stuffed dog, like very obviously not the real dog. And then she goes into the foggy woods as the music swells, buries him with a mound of dirt, and places a stick like a cross on top of his grave while she recites a prayer. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want, but I do want. They killed my dog, so please come. We need a miracle. And then there's thunder in the mountains, and the pale rider approaches. And that's your first 10 minutes. So she summoned him. She summoned this reincarnated ghost of somebody who's coming back to seek vengeance by killing the person that killed them while they were in. Well, that's basically how you can interpret the ending of the movie, but that sets everything up. Now, obviously, Pale Rider refers to a horseman of the apocalypse. When he finally arrives in the settlement, this girl, her name's Megan, by the way, she just happens to be reading the book of Revelations as he approaches on his white horse. Now, he's got a very distinctive hat, Clint Eastwood, and if you look at his hats in different movies, I mean, they're all different designs, but I really like this particular design. It's very nice looking. So just look up the hat that he wears in Pale Rider if you're curious. Now, as he walks around, he doesn't say much. Like I said, he's like the Terminator. As he walks around, there's always the sound of spurs, so he makes this rattling sound. And he's an ace shot with a gun, and he makes pithy remarks just like the Terminator, and has no weaknesses. And that kind of ruins the movie. There's no, he's never at risk. He doesn't have a weak spot. He can't be defeated. So you just know that he's going to win in the end. And like I said earlier, that he does fight these marauders with a piece of 2x4. And it's a very silly sequence with a lot of fast edits disguising the fact that they didn't have a choreographer, I don't think. It's almost a bit spaghetti western-ish. So And after defeating like 5 or 6 marauders with this piece of wood, he sort of grasps it in his hand and says, good bit of timber. So that's his little Terminator quip. Now, in the movies of 1999, the podcast from last year, there was another Clint Eastwood directed movie called True Crime, and I believe he was playing a reporter, like a bit of Woodward and Bernstein kind of stuff going on in that movie. And we commented at the time that there was this massive age discrepancy because he was like 85 years old or something, and his love interest was in her late 30s or early 40s or something like that. A similar thing goes on in this movie because I guess he must be in his early 50s by this point. And the love interest is this young Megan girl who was only 14. Like the character is 14 years old, but also the actor that played her, Sydney Penny, was only 14 years old at the time of filming this movie. And she becomes romantically interested in this nameless, he's not nameless really. They call him, what do they call him? He's like the preacher. They call him the preacher. So she declares her love for him. Her mum's also in love with him. Fortunately, he doesn't reciprocate that, but it's still a bit uncomfortable seeing this massive age difference and this underage girl. What I did find interesting is the settlement are mining gold. So they're panning gold in the river, and they use sledgehammers to break up rocks and they then sort of sort the sand and the rocks and pan for gold. And then the marauders are sort of running their own gold mining operation on a different part of the river, and that's part of the reason why they want to drive out these settlers. And their mining technique is quite different. It's using some kind of hydrology, they called it, where they use water under immense pressure and they sort of blast away the hillside with all of this high pressure water, and then that feeds into their gold mining equipment. They have like conveyor belts and things set up. So that was quite interesting. Now, one of the marauders is Richard Keel, who you might recognise from Moonraker. He was Jaws, the guy with the steel teeth. And he's also in Happy Gilmore. He's this really massive guy. So he's one of the marauders, and he actually rides on horseback in this movie, and apparently his horse collapsed due to his massive size. But it was quite interesting to see him pop up. You don't see him in a lot of movies. And like I said before, Clint Eastwood did reveal in interviews that his character is in fact the reincarnation of a preacher who's going to seek his vengeance and is in fact a ghost in this movie, which is perhaps why he can survive all of these gun shootouts. Now, right at the end of the movie, when he does get his vengeance, he shoots this guy in the back, leaving a pattern of bullets, which is like exactly matches the pattern of scars on his own back that you see at the beginning of the movie. Anyway, that's Pale Rider. It's okay. But now...
I'm driving along and I'm just singing my song. I'm in a news-free zone.
Oh, well, welcome to the News-Free Zone, everybody. It's that time of the podcast where we look back at the news from 1985 so we don't have to look at the news from 2025, which is just depressing. Now, last week I was talking about the mission to take a Muslim member of the royal family into space. That happened last week. And this week, he's orbiting the Earth, and Mission Control woke up the crew by playing Saudi pop singer Muhammad Abdo's Abad Kontam Wala Garibian, and Prince Sultan conducted an Arabic language tour of this shuttle, the space shuttle, which was broadcast across the Middle East while he read the entire Quran in space, the holy book. Still the only person to have done so. When King Fahd called the shuttle live on television, 29 Saudi princes watched from Kennedy Space Center, alongside 230 other Arab VIPs, which is just amazing, isn't it? An extraordinary week of international cooperation, just 7 months shy of the Challenger disaster, which would put an end to it all. Now, also this week, Air India Flight 182 exploded over the Atlantic, killing all 329 people aboard, including 268 Canadians. It was Sikh extremists seeking an independent Khalistan, and they planted a bomb on board, and that made it become Canada's deadliest terrorist attack and one of aviation's worst disasters. Now, I was saying to someone tonight, there were so many hijackings and bombings and air disasters in the 80s. It just beggars belief, honestly. This was before flying really became affordable for many people, I think. So it was a bit of a luxury back in the 80s, but still, it's just incredible how much terrorism and hijackings there were. Now, in South Australia, what's happening in South Australia? Oh, South Australia authorised the Roxby Downs uranium mine. Uranium in the news, how interesting. Nowadays, that site is called the Olympic Dam, but that was the world's largest uranium deposit. Of course, there were fierce protests against this from environmental and anti-nuclear groups. And also in Melbourne, in Australia, 40,000 farmers marched on Parliament House, one of the largest rural protests in Australian history, just about the farmers' anger about the Australian government's agricultural policies. But now let's go over to Usenet. Now, you too can read Usenet from 40 years ago if you go to olduse.net in your web browser. Usenet was the social media of 1985, and this week I've got very little. In fact, I've only got one thing to mention, and it was Henry Spencer on net.micro responding to last week's post, which had all sorts of specs and information about the Amiga. Now, Henry Spencer worked in the zoology department of the University of Toronto, and he was extremely skeptical about all of these technical specs. And he responded with all sorts of flames, saying that those who will not learn from Unix are condemned to reinvent it badly when it's talking about the Amiga's operating system. Now, that little quote rang a bit of a bell. And it turns out that Henry Spencer, this very guy, is the person who coined the phrase, those who will not learn from Unix are condemned to reinvent it badly. He coined it. Not only did he coin that phrase, but he's quite famous because he's the guy who is responsible for the Usenet archives, the archives that allow me to read the old Usenet these days, the archives that were bought by Google and digitized and used to train AIs and all sorts of things like that as well. So he was keeping archives of all of the Usenet feeds right back in the early 80s at the University of Toronto. So well done, Henry Spencer. Good on you, even though you disagreed with the Amiga, which is, of course, my favourite computer of all time. Anyway, that's about it for this week. So see you all next week. And please don't forget to rewind.